Alright, so Visual Studio Crash Course, just to get you going here. Um, I'm running Visual Studio 2013. I'm running Ultimate Edition. This shouldn't really matter which edition you're running. I think I told you to go grab Express, but anyway, when you first load up Visual Studio, you have the Start page here. Um, Start page has several sections. There's the Start menu, which of course allows you to create new projects, open existing projects. Source control, open from source controls if you have like behind the scenes you have a Subversion, Git, or Team Foundation server, Visual Source Safe, whatever, something behind the scenes that handles source control. Um, Source control is basically just a secure way to store your source code and version it, and so multiple people can collaborate in the same project. And there's a whole I could talk to you for a couple of days in source control, so I'm not going to talk about it here too much since we're not going to use it. And then there's this recent section, just any recent projects that you've had running. Um, this is Microsoft's basic news feed here, which I've never actually paid attention to, but it gives you things going on, maybe something you might want to pay attention to. I never have. Um, and like I said, it's just sort of Microsoft's way of communicating with developers and saying, hey, come check this out, or learn this, or whatever. Um, uh, Over on the left here, you got Server Explorer. If you were connected to any file servers, database servers, Windows, Azure, SharePoint, whatever, we won't be going over any of that because I don't have any of that available. Toolbox won't become important until you're actually working on some type of user interface. And now it's installing stuff because I clicked on it, so great. Um, but we won't be using Toolbox in this first part. On the left-hand side, there's some other stuff that will become important later, Solution Explorer, Team Explorer. I'm not going to go over that immediately here. So initially, we are just going to create a new project. In this new project window, you can see everything that Visual Studio has available to it, Visual Basic, Visual C Sharp, C++, F, blah, 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 blah. I've done VB in the past. I'm doing C Sharp in my current job. It's kind of the more desired language currently. That probably changes every few years, but currently I'm a C Sharp developer, so I'm going to go with that. Next thing you got to pay attention to is your framework. There's several different frameworks that you can install. Every couple of years Microsoft upgrades and adds new features. They release a new framework. The newest one's 4.5. Not a lot of people have embraced it yet, but it will be in the next year, I'd say. And then under that, you have just a list of all the different types of applications you're capable of creating with this tool, most of which I've never used. Because I'm on C Sharp, it's everything. I can click on Store Apps and it filters that list. Desktop filters the list even further, to just ones available to that type of development. For the start here, though, I'm just going to do a simple desktop app, and I'm going to pick console because there's no user interface elements. This will focus on just basic coding skills, and we don't have to care about front end and inputs and all that mess yet. So next thing you do is you come down here and you got to name your application. So I am going to call it Beginner App, and I like to give them some type of name of what they are. So this is, we'll call it main, beginnerapp.main. This is our main project that we're going to have in a solution. I'll explain more of that later. You can browse to directories. I have set up this dev tutorials directory out here, so I'm going to select that as my folder where all this code is going to go. And then you have to name the solution. This will become more evident in a bit, but I don't want .main in that solution name because this is beginner app solution. This is the beginner app project, and then there will be other projects we eventually add later. Create a directory for the solution is going to create a directory inside. If you look over here, I got my D drive, I got that dev tutorials folder, which is currently empty. Create a directory for solution checkbox over here. When I click OK, it's going to create a directory called beginner app. Inside that directory, it's going to create a file called beginnerapp.sln, solution file, which will launch the entire studio. And it'll create a project folder under there called beginnerapp.main, and then all the project files that we will be working on will be inside that directory. So I'm going to click OK, and then watch over here. It builds beginner app folder, And then inside the beginner app folder, there's beginner app solution, beginner app main. It's still creating beginner app main. Now it's done. So inside of here, there's a whole bunch of files for this particular project. Now the Solution Explorer comes in handy. So I'm going to click on that, expand it. I'm going to click pin here to leave it out so it's forced and we have it available to us at all times. So like I said before, you have in dev tutorials or whichever folder you create. This can be called whatever you want. And basically it's going to be a central location where I store all my source code. That's all dev tutorials is. Name it whatever you want. Inside dev tutorials is my solutions that I'm creating. Beginner app, I'll create another one eventually. First web, I'll create another one eventually. I don't know, API, whatever. But this particular solution is beginner app, which is this solution. Inside beginner app, there is the solution file. If we were to close Visual Studio, we go ahead and save all this and close Visual Studio, and we were to double click on beginner app.solution, it will fire up Visual Studio and it will load into Visual Studio any second here. Come on. I need a new computer. Why is this so slow? So you'll see that it is loaded Visual Studio, and in Visual Studio is loaded right directly into beginner app because we opened it from this. Now inside beginner app there is beginner app.main. Beginner app.main. And inside beginner app.main is a bunch of files and folders that are for that project. Projects are where you do your actual work and how you can actually separate the areas of concern, I guess. I know it's not the right word, but so the main application is where I'm going to do all of my real work, is where I'm going to do sort of my work. We'll eventually, well, eventually, I'll just do it now. Since I'm explaining this, I'm going to add a new project. This new project, I'm going to create a class library. Class libraries are those old DLL files. DLLs are basically a way to encapsulate, just contain logic for the application. DLLs won't directly display anything. They'll do a bunch of thinking behind the scenes and manipulate the data and pass it back to your main application in a way that it expects to use it, and then main application will be the one to actually do something with that data and display it to the user or take user input and pass it off to data. So since I keep saying data, beginner app.data, I'm going to go back up a folder over here so you can see what happens. Because we are in my dev tutorials folder inside the beginner app solution, I'm going to create a class library project called beginner app.data. I'm going to hit OK. And over here you'll see we now have a beginner app.data folder and once again some files inside of there. And it's created this new class 1. I'm going to delete that because class 1's a bad name and I want to show you something else with that anyway. So now you'll see we have solution and we have two projects inside of here, beginner app main, beginner app data. Beginner app main is bold because it is our startup project. When you run the solution, when you run this project, beginner app main is going to be the one that executes. That is your exe file. The exe file, eventually, I haven't done it yet, but the exe file is going to say, all right, when I run, I need data. So I'm going to go to my beginner app.data. I'll show you how to link that up in a bit. First thing we're going to do is show you quickly how a console app, I guess that's the first thing I should do before I even do that. Several items in here, most of which are going to be pointless to us for now, except for Program CS. Program CS is going to be the first file that runs. You can tell that by going into project properties. I don't want to get too deep into that here. But it's the first project that runs, and main is the startup method. Quick thing over that. So we have solutions, we have projects. Projects are inside solutions. Solution is the overall application. Projects are inside solutions. Inside solutions, you have classes. There's other things besides classes, but we're going to stick with class right now. Classes are inside a namespace. In this case, the namespace is beginner app.main because that is our project. And then inside classes, there are methods, there can be properties, so we're going to say private, static, some name, oop, I did that wrong, string, some name, and it's going to have getters and setters because it's a property. I can go over that later, what the difference between properties and blah, blah, blah. But you got properties, you got methods, you'd have variables, so private, string, oh, it's got to be static, static, string, underscore, some name. Now you notice the difference between the two of these here. I named them different because this one has an underscore and this one does not have an underscore. That's a naming convention I like to use. This one, you'll notice, does not have a getter and setter at the end of it, where this one does, has a get set at the end of it. Basic difference between those is that this is a private local variable because we have labeled it as private, and it's a local variable because it does not have getters and setters. This is a property, also private, because I'll explain those later. But it has getters and setters on the end of it, so that makes it a property and not a variable. And that's where the underscore comes into play. I like to name, local variables like this with underscores in front of them, and properties generally don't. More about those later. So static void main is going to be the very first thing that we load. The very first thing that we load, and it has to do something. So we're just going to print something to the screen, so we're going to use the old, everyone's used to, hello world. So console.writeLine, oops, writeLine, and inside of there we're going to say hello world. That is now a functional application because beginner app main is going to start up. It's going to find its startup class of program, and then it's going to hit its startup method, main, and it's going to do stuff. Just quickly click up here, click start. It's going to run. Oop, sorry, forgot something here. You notice that it flashed up that console window, but it was too fast for us to actually do anything. So I'm just going to throw this little hack in here, read line. Read line basically means I'm not going to do anything until I have some kind of input from the user. So we'll just hit start again, and there. Now we've printed hello world to the window, and it's not going to do anything until I'm just going to hit the space bar. Oops. Sorry, enter, and it will go away. And the application ends itself. It's done. It's done everything that it's been told to do. So a few things happened here. I've accessed the console, which is the console window. I've told it to write a line, and then I gave it this string. You know it's a string because it's inside those double quotes. Strings, I guess I should have started this a little bit earlier, but strings are names, character strings, any text basically as a string, where then there's numbers, integers, decimals, floats, and a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to skim over here. But console.writeLine, if I hover over this, you can see that console.writeLine expects a string value, void console.writeLine string value. So it's expecting a string, which is why I gave it this stuff in double quotes. You could put whatever you want in here. You could put, hey, how are you? Date is, and then 7/20/2014. And if we run that again, see, puts it in there, read line. So like I said, and then read line basically just keeps the window open until we tell it to close. So very quick crash course on getting an application set up, running, and the very, very basics of what you can do. I will create another video later on, and it'll be about linking this stuff up and getting a little deeper. So there is your quick crash course on setup. See you in a bit.